Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're talking about digital storytelling for global citizenship. And I'm super excited because we've got an absolute expert here today who's going to share her insights and wisdom with us, LeeAnne Lavender. LeeAnne is a coach and a facilitator for international education. She specializes in digital storytelling, service learning, and global citizenship, and loves partnering with schools and educators to create deep learning experiences. She has worked in international education for 16 years and is committed to building change-making cultures in school. LeeAnne, welcome. It's so awesome to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Lottie. It's so great to have this conversation with you.
You've done so much work in this space. Could you please tell us, what is digital storytelling? It might be a new term to people watching and listening to this. And how does it contribute to civic readiness and global citizenship?
I love that question so much and on so many levels. So digital storytelling is really simple. At the heart of it, it is stories that are told in any digital format that you can think of. So if you imagine all of the ways that you operate online and the kinds of websites that you visit and the podcasts that you listen to, the videos that you watch, all of that can qualify as digital storytelling. So if you have any kind of story that has a purpose and it's presented in a digital space, that's digital storytelling. So it's really, really easy in that regard in terms of what it is, how it contributes to global citizenship education and service learning. It's so powerful. I consider it two things. I consider it a frame because it's definitely a way that we can take what we're doing with global citizenship and service learning and then kind of put the bones to it, the scaffolding to it, so that we can use digital storytelling to actually frame our learning experience with the students and drive it forward. I also really think of digital storytelling in this space as a tool because if you're engaged with service learning and global citizenship education, often you want your students to be engaged with things like advocacy and research that again has a purpose that can create positive, purposeful change. Digital storytelling can be the tool, the vehicle by which your students actually engage with that work. And so I think it can be both things at the same time, and I think it can be sometimes one or the other, but it really can further and deepen what we're doing in the digital story, in the global citizenship space. And I think it does so for a variety of reasons. I mean, our kids, our students, they live in the digital space so much, right, of the time. And so when we bring digital storytelling into what we're doing with our learning experiences, we engage them because they're very familiar with this space. We also help them to transition from passive consumers to content creators. And so it's a really fantastic way to get deeper engagement with your students, deeper learning with your students, and at the same time, really achieve those ends with service learning and global citizenship education. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I think, how it deepens that space. And there's a lot of different details we could get into more as well in terms of how that works.
It reminded me of when we talk about media literacy, it's not just the consuming, it's the producing as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. The media literacy, I think that sometimes we assume that that's always done in a purposeful way in schools, but my experience is that often it's not. You know, there's kind of, I think, assumptions made about what students know in terms of media literacy and what they can and cannot do in terms of their skills with media and technology. And so I think digital storytelling, when you can really see it, K through 12 in a school, also really helps, I think, a school to be purposeful about what it's doing with media literacy, teaching our students, right? How do you evaluate what is real news? What does it mean to present your ideas in a variety of different ways? How do you communicate persuasively? So then we move into that like literacy space as well, right? And then also into the civic readiness and the global competencies. So we can hit a lot of really amazing objectives and targets with digital storytelling, and it's fun at the same time, right? The kids really like it and enjoy it.
So you must have seen a lot of different student projects that use digital storytelling in different ways. Would love you to share some examples of those and what you've seen has worked really well to create powerful learning experiences.
As I was thinking about our conversation, I was really trying to narrow down, oh my goodness, what examples will we talk about? Because I have been so lucky to see so many examples K through 12. And I know a lot of universities are actually employing digital storytelling in powerful ways as well. And so, it goes beyond, but my experience, of course, is more K through 12. And so even with the youngest learners, digital storytelling can be so successful. It can really engage our students in terms of how to visually tell a story, even when they are still really acquiring those language skills of reading and writing in the primary years. But I'll share a couple of different stories that kind of span the scope of school. So I'm going to start up in high school. I actually, for years, taught a course myself called Global Development Studies. And when I first got very interested in digital storytelling, I thought to myself, okay, this whole course that I'm doing is about advocacy and global competencies and global citizenship. And then I thought, wait a minute, the students are still producing things that I'm the only one that sees them, right? So like a traditional classroom, right? They're writing essays, they're doing some reports, they're doing some presentations that just happen in class. And I thought, I think we can reorient this a little bit. So I took all of the assessments for that course and I turned them into outward facing products that were all digital storytelling products. And the students had a lot of choice in what they wanted to do. They could choose to write, take photos, do podcasts, do videos. There were a lot of different things they were able to do. We also actually spent time learning even basic things like graphic design and infographics and different things like that. So we turned everything into outward facing, and then we used our school digital storytelling platform to be the place where the students would share those products. And not all of the products got shared on the platform. It was kind of like we at the end of each unit, and the students went in a self-guided and directed way through the course as well. When they produced their artifacts, it was kind of like, okay, well, let's conference about this and see what's awesome and maybe what needs work. And then when we get to a point where this is publishable, it'll get up onto the platform. Or you might just want to leave this one, take those skills and really focus on doing, a different job next time with that particular feedback that you got. And it became so powerful because the students really wanted to have their work published. They knew people were reading it. It was very, very widely read in our community, everything that we were posting. And that really deepened the engagement, but also, again, taught them so many skills along the way. And of course, in the conferencing, I just loved the conferencing because I got so many opportunities to get to know the students better and also really work on those deep skills in terms of where they were individually with what they were doing. So that was one really, really successful experience for sure. But I have seen so many at all different grade levels. I just recently worked with 2 teachers in grade 5. They teach grade 5 at a school in Austin, Texas, and they actually wanted to create their own classroom digital storytelling platform as a way to engage the students with the sustainable development goals and also work on all of these things that we've just talked about: literacy, media literacy, communication skills, civic readiness, all of that. And they wanted to align what they were doing with their school's work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So they opened this up to the students, and right away the students dove in. They did lots of mini workshops about skills like, how to take a good photo with your iPhone, different things like that, how to write for news, what this looks like. And those 5th graders are producing incredible content, and the conversations that have opened up on that campus because of what those 5th graders are doing, it's phenomenal. Other grade levels are involved, parents are involved. Of course, there's community engagement with community partners. It's just been so incredible to watch, and the teachers have been really, really happy with the results. It's been, I think, deeper than they would have anticipated, and also it's reached further in their community than they anticipated as well. So it's been a great success story.
So aligned to this real world learning and having a purpose and having an audience, and how powerful that can be for students, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you get that hands-on component that I think that our students know when they're learning something, if it's applicable in their experience, in their life experience or not. And I think that does make a difference in terms of their interest and their engagement with what they're learning. And so when they know that there is that hands-on component, either with a community partner in terms of something that they're really deeply now connected to because of the interviews that they've conducted, the stories that they've heard, and the stories that they get to tell, or any other way that they're really applying their learning in a real world context, it's amazing to see what happens. And the kids are so much more capable in this realm than sometimes we might think, right? Which is really great.
I guess the second part to that question, LeeAnne, is the most successful examples of this work that you've seen, you talked about how some in your first example made it onto this platform and some didn't. What skills, knowledge, background makes this work a success? What do students need to
teachers ask if they're not already doing digital storytelling, and I think it's a question that can inspire a little bit of fear on the part of the educators. Certainly I felt this way too when I first started into digital storytelling, because I thought, oh my goodness, I love technology. I've used technology my whole life, but do I consider myself to be, a tech whiz? I would not consider myself to be that. And so I too was a little nervous in terms of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do if I encounter problems, especially on in the video realm? What am I going to do if I can't help the students? And really the only skills that I think are required to get going with digital storytelling is openness and curiosity and tenacity. Because what I've discovered is that our students are amazingly gifted in this realm. Again, they do spend so much of their time in the digital space. They usually know more than we know, right? When it comes to the technical end of things. And so I think they love it when we come alongside them as co-creators and co-learners. I think they love to see their teachers trying to do the same things that they're doing. The first time I made a podcast alongside my students, I was thrilled with the outcome because it felt like really exciting and successful to me. But I think that they also thought it was really cool that I had to come to them sometimes and say, okay, wait a minute, how do I do this? And how do I edit that? And what happens when this, and so they were so helpful. And I think that they love that challenge, right? Of figuring things out. I love too that it means that sometimes we don't know the answers, and it's modeling to the students. This is where learning occurs, when we don't know the answers, right? And then we have to go and find them. So I think that really the only skills that are needed is that open-minded kind of approach and the willingness to learn and to get messy and to get in there and try things. And when they don't work out, it's okay, we just continue learning. And then as we do, we kind of realize, I think, a few months in, you're sort of like, whoa, I can do all of these things that before I couldn't do. This is really cool.
Awesome. Well, I think we've sort of touched on this idea of, some of the barriers that might exist for educators to do this work with their students. What are some of the other challenges that you've seen educators come across, and maybe some of the strategies that have helped them overcome them?
Yeah, I think a couple of other things that spring to my mind in terms of challenges and also strategies to overcome those challenges would fall into the realm of flexibility. And by that, a few things kind of come to mind. Like, I think that one of the struggles that sometimes teachers have could be the idea of, oh my goodness, what happens if we get into this digital storytelling experience? And I think the same goes for service learning, because service learning is also a very organic, living process. You know what I mean? Like we're encouraging our students to examine their community, local and global, to dig in and learn, to connect with people, to figure out, the needs and assets in their communities and to act in response. That is going to look so different, and for different groups, different students, and sometimes it takes longer than we think it might, right? When we look at our unit plan. And so I think sometimes the flexible nature of these realms is wonderful and dynamic and creative, but it can be a barrier or a challenge sometimes to some teachers if they feel they're too tight with their curricular planning and they don't have flex, you know what I mean? So I think a strategy for that, in my experience, has been kind of the mindset, cultivating different mindsets around how we teach and what we teach, and maybe stepping back sometimes from our curriculum map and saying, okay, wait a minute, I know I'm supposed to be moving on to that next unit, but this is deep learning and this matters to the kids. And we've got an opportunity to hit some of those targets that are coming up with what we're doing right now. So how can I flex? How can I maintain an open way of thinking about this so that my students have the best learning opportunity possible? And so I think that's probably one big challenge that might surface for some teachers. And maybe another thing could also be in that realm, the flexibility to reevaluate one's own role in the classroom. So again, if we think about things more as, student-centered instead of teacher-centered, it's liberating, I think, to be able to say, okay, I'm the coach here in this particular experience, and I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to direct how this is going to go and what the outcomes are going to be, because this is real world stuff. We don't really know until we're into it. And so to kind of relinquish your control as a teacher and to really invest that back into the kids and say, kids, like, I really want you to develop your sense of agency in this, and I'm going to be here supporting you, coaching you, cheering you on, helping you with any challenges that come your way. I think that's fantastic. Teaching and learning. But I think for some teachers who might be new to that way of teaching, that can feel a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning. And so that's a challenge. But I think a strategy is to try it and to get some experience and to, maybe seek some help from some teachers who have done this before. And then just get your feet wet, and kind of see, wow, what happened? And do a plus delta at the end, like what went well, what maybe didn't go so well, what would I change next time in terms of improving it, and allowing yourself and your students that room to sort of go, yeah, let's dig in here and let's see what happens and what the outcomes will be and the impact, right, of what we're doing as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example, LeeAnne, of how we've talked for so long in education about moving away from the teacher-centered approach to, stage on the stage, to guide on the side, sage on the stage, to guide on the side. And technology is a big driver of that, isn't it? It has to be, because it's iterating itself so quickly and developing so fast that our students are ahead of us most of the time with this stuff. So we have to be the guide on the side. And it's I think it's also an interesting space, as you've said before too, because they're so skilled and developed in some aspects of technology, but then we also make this assumption that, they have all those skills when it comes to producing content, which they don't necessarily have. They're very experienced in consuming, but that next step in producing seems to, need that support from my observations.
I totally agree with you. And I think that that's even with the older learners. Sometimes it's surprising. I had one student who was such an incredibly talented student in so many ways. And he really, really struggled with the visual side of media literacy in terms of being able to convey his information using things like infographics and posters and other types of visual media. And it was really interesting to sit and coach him through that, because it's a skill that's needed, right? Like, as he moves on to college and beyond, I'm like, wow, this is really cool to identify this now, that this is maybe an area that is, needs some development. And so what does that look like? And how can, you really achieve this in a way that you feel really comfortable and confident moving forward? And so I think that's absolutely true. And the more that we can prepare our students for that deep engagement and that deep kind of conversation and communication, I do think we help them with their civic readiness, right? I mean, then when they are off on their own in whatever field that they are working in, this will serve them so well. And of course, they'll just hone their skills as they get more accomplished and as they get older, right? So yeah, I feel really strongly about that. I think that sometimes we, as educators, especially maybe if we're older, more mature than maybe some of our younger teaching partners, we might think, oh my gosh, like, how can we limit the technology? How can we, and there are definitely times where we want the screens down and we want the kids doing other things, like where that is definitely important in our educational experience. But I think sometimes we can think or talk about the technology in kind of a negative way. And I think for our students, they don't understand that because technology is so natural to them. And how can we instead kind of, come at that world with a more kind of generative and creative mindset and approach? I think if we can do that, we can really get those students engaged with things that maybe we were struggling with before. So it's exciting to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on this huge area, which is tech for good, right? And I'd love to have another conversation with you about this and hear more. But that does bring us to the end of our conversation today. So thank you so much, LeeAnne. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you and hear your amazing insights and wisdom into this space, and really encourage everybody watching this to connect with you and find out more about your work.
Oh, thank you so much, Lottie. It's so great to chat with you as well.
Okay, take care. Ka kite ano. Bye.
Bye-bye.